Hi, welcome to the Marvelous Mud Pottery Studio podcast. I'm Diana Harrison and I'm here with Rochelle Eason. And today we're going to talk about pottery.
Woo! All right, pottery. I can talk about pottery.
Okay, first up, good segue. Let's define what's pottery. We tell us what's pottery, what's ceramics, and how does the terminology all work?
Yeah. So a lot of times people use pottery and ceramics interchangeably. But I come from the educational world, from the academic world, teaching as a college professor, and also all of my studies for the last 40 some years of pottery. And so here's the deal of what it truly is in the industry. So ceramics is the name of the entire industry. It is the umbrella that has every other aspect that uses clay or some kind of soft matter that gets fired or heated to become solid matter. So even in the dental industry, they're using ceramics. It's ceramic teeth, all of that goes from a soft material and then gets fired and becomes a hardened material. So ceramics is that whole big name. Pottery is under the umbrella of ceramics. Pottery is that artistic avenue, that artistic path under ceramics that would be different than your dental ceramics, right? And different than they use ceramics in building, in architecture, and all of those kinds of things. So even in pottery, when we talk about pottery, there's actually a differentiation between pottery and ceramic artistry, or potter versus ceramic artist. And so a lot of people use it interchangeably. That's not wrong, that's just not the technical part of it. So a lot of times we look at pottery as being that functional piece, and I call them fabulously functional pottery. It can really mean about people who are in production of pottery. So they are mass producing or even smaller boutique potters or pottery studios. That would be considered more pottery. They're making bowls and plates and mugs and that kind of thing. And often as a potter in production mode, you're making either small batch pottery, which might be 100 pieces of the same thing, rather than a manufacturer that might make thousands of pieces in that. And so pottery can be hand built, it can be wheel thrown, it can be slip poured, whatever material that or whichever way you're getting the clay to form, but you're doing it more in production matter, that would be considered more of a potter or pottery wheel or pottery industry. Now, ceramic artists are even a different class. So a ceramic artist is somebody who's going to use clay to create one-offs or special, like more artistic style pieces. They're usually more intense as far as the build. They could be sculptural, they could still be tabletop or hang on the wall, but they are, there's the artistry in it. So it's not just about creating a bowl that you're gonna eat from. It's gonna be something that might be intertwined and it grows and it has all of these very artistic elements to it. And it can even be mixed with other mediums. So a ceramic artist would be somebody who is an artist, a full master artist that would show in a gallery, show in juried art shows, that kind of thing. But what they're doing, they're not doing this, they're doing more unique type sculptural pieces that really reflect their inner expression. Now, potters, which we are considered ourselves potters as well as ceramic artists. So potters don't actually have to be in that mass production mode, but there is a difference between a potter and a ceramic artist. And even though a ceramic artist could use any of these ways to make pottery that I was just talking about, they could throw in the wheel, they can hand build, or they can slip pour, the result is what makes it different to be a ceramic artist versus a potter. But again, some people use those interchangeably. But I think it's important to highlight a ceramic artist because they are very specialized in what they're creating. And one of the things I always say about our students here, our members and our students, is that I am raising ceramic artists. And even though you're all potters, we're talking about really putting in your self-expression, unearthing your uniqueness and having that come through your clay. And we don't do dipping for our glazes. I have all of our students glaze everything by hand versus the dip, dunk, and done is what we call when we're dipping, because that artistry comes out not only in the build, but in the way pieces are finished with glaze. So that is the difference of that. There's also some boutique studios, they call them, that are really not boutique. They are bigger businesses that I would consider that are boutique, but they create functional pieces with the help of what's called a jig. And a jig is something you would attach to the wheel, and it's almost like a mold form that goes on the wheel. So they're throwing bowls or they're throwing plates or mugs, but they have this jig that's attached to the wheel so that they're coming out looking almost the same as all of the ones beforehand. So that again is a way that pottery can be made too. It kind of combines a person's hand skills with the added apparatus that's going to make it be consistent. That's what they're looking for. If you have a boutique production company for clay, you want it to be as consistent as possible through all the pieces. So that's a lot. But the basics, again, to recap, is that ceramics is the umbrella, and then under that you have every kind of field that would use heat to transform a clay matter from the soft stage to the solid stage, and under that would also be potter and ceramic artists.
Okay, so now let's talk about the clay for a few minutes. Okay, so tell me the difference between like earthenware, stoneware, the different kinds of clay.
So there's 3 different categories of clay. We've got earthenware, stoneware, and porcelain. And they go by the firing stages. So earthenware clay is fired in a very low fire temperature. It's going to bisque at 1900 degrees, but it's going to glaze fire at like 1600 degrees. Stoneware is what we do here. Stoneware also bisque fires to 1900 degrees, but its final temperature is around 2200 degrees. And then porcelain's even higher than that. We're going into just under about 3000 for that. And porcelain is a type of clay, but it's also a category, which we'll get into later. So the difference between the 2 most common categories that we talk about is earthenware and stoneware. Earthenware would be like going to a paint your own pottery studio and the pieces are already poured and you just go in and you glaze them, and then they dip every single piece in a clear glaze to make sure that the whole thing is covered, because on a piece of earthenware, the glaze makes a shell around that piece, and that shell is what makes the piece hold water and food safe. So earthenware clay never ever, we call that vitrification, if it closes up. So earthenware never vitrifies, never on its own without being completely covered in glaze would it hold water. It's always going to have these little pores in it that water's going to seep through. Think terracotta planter pot. Think, the white clay planters that you might get at a big box store or even a little nursery. Those are all going to be earthenware. They're actually softer. You can actually even get a nail mark in it if you kind of try to pierce it, because it's never going to harden. And so again, for that to hold water, you have to glaze it. Stoneware is what we do. Stoneware vitrifies on its own. So even if we don't glaze a piece, that clay vitrifies, which means all of those pores shrink down to make a very closed surface, solid surface. It becomes stone. It literally turns to stone in the kiln. And it's food safe, it holds water, it does all those things without glaze. On that level of clay, the glaze is a decoration. It's just an added fun thing. So if you look at my mug that I'm using right now, all of this brown and white, that's a combination of two different clays. And I have a color inside, a glaze inside, that's this purple, and then of course this purple drips on the outside. That's called a liner glaze in there. But I don't need the liner glaze in there to actually have this hold my drink, because it would do that regardless of if there was glaze or not. It's a little easier to clean with glaze in there, and obviously it's very pretty, and I always have to get my purple in somehow. But that's the main difference. So stoneware deals with temperature changes really well. We can put our stoneware in the microwave, in the dishwasher, in the oven, in the freezer, can go through all of those temperature changes. And as long as you're slowly transforming that temperature, for example, you put your piece in the oven, when the oven's heating up, you actually can put your casserole baker in the oven to heat up at the same time. And then you would take it back out, fill it, and then cook with it. Think baking stone. A baking stone is preheated before it's used. And that, again, is stoneware. Stoneware is so versatile and makes for functional pieces. But even as a ceramic artist, I prefer using stoneware clays because it's a more solid piece, it's a more structurally sound piece, and it is a stronger piece, meaning like clay can be thinner, but it's still strong. It's not going to break off or crack, not nearly as easily as an earthenware piece would be. Earthenware, again, is soft and doesn't vitrify. The third category is porcelain, and that's what we don't use, we don't talk about. We have a stoneware level porcelain that we use, so we keep to this range of temperature. Porcelain is where a lot of confusion comes in. Porcelain is the name of the category of high fire, but there's also specific clay named porcelain. The benefit of porcelain, there's two special aspects to porcelain and going that high. Number one, everybody knows about porcelain sculptures, porcelain figurines, porcelain this, porcelain that, and it is usually a higher price. But they think of porcelain as delicate because they've seen these porcelain sculptures that have very thin aspects. Porcelain is actually very, very strong, and it's demonstrated through those sculptures that have these very fine aspects to them. Those fine aspects haven't broken, they haven't chipped, they haven't done anything, and that's because of the porcelain clay being so strong. So that's one aspect to it. I think of the old Ladro porcelain pieces my mother had. You know, they're very, like a Victorian woman who's holding a little fan, who has these little curls in her hair and all that. Very fine detail, very exquisite piece, but done in porcelain because porcelain is so strong it will hold those fine little aspects. The other benefit to porcelain, and even our P5 in our stoneware level will do too, but it can be translucent. So you can have pieces that are so thin and they are structurally sound that you can see through, which is amazing because we're talking about a solid clay piece. It's not going to be like a window, you know, like that, but you could definitely make a lamp or pieces that the light from outside are going to shine through. It's a very unique type of finish on it. And there's actually something, we were just talking about this in class this morning, black ice porcelain, which is actually a stoneware level, but you can also get it in the porcelain level. But it's black porcelain that is also translucent. You can see light come through. Remember, it's not transparent. There's a difference between transparent and translucent. Glass, clear glass, is transparent. We're talking about translucent, that light shows through. Is that good? That's a lot. So this is a lot of the academia behind it, but it's fascinating. To me, it's very fascinating.
Yeah, it is very fascinating, but I thought it was important for us to cover because we're talking about, like, the context of our podcast is going to be predominantly stoneware,
Right.
mid-fire. Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I chose that, and I've been working with stoneware for decades, it is the durability of it, because you could go to a paint your own pottery studio, get a mug, glaze it, they're gonna dip it, they're gonna fire it, and you're gonna get it. The first time if you put that in the microwave, it's going to craze. And even over time, it's going to craze, even if you don't put it in the microwave. Crazing is hairline cracks in your glaze. And it's a glaze, it's kind of, what we call it is a glaze pottery fit. It's a glaze or clay body fit. Over time, that fit changes, whether it's when you put it under hot water to clean it, or even just the use of it. The crazing happens, and if you would go and look at any piece in your closet, maybe in your cabinet, you might even have a piece of earthenware that has glazed crazing on it. And you shouldn't drink out of anything like that. You shouldn't eat out of anything like that, because as these little baby crevices open up, or this crazed glaze opens up, whatever you're eating or drinking in that goes through that. And remember, though, that clay body is not vitrified, it's porous. So that food, that drink, whatever it is, can go get trapped in the little pores of earthenware. And there is such a thing called bisque poisoning. Now, bisque poisoning happens over a long period of time, like 10 or more years. If you're using the same mug that has crazed, and what happens is that food and that liquid would get stuck in the pores, and then bacteria starts to grow. And then that has its own life, of course, as it goes on. There's that old House episode years and years ago. What, House was on maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago, that talked about bisque poisoning. It was really interesting. So that's kind of the educational part of that. Is one of the reasons why I chose to use stoneware, is because I want to make sure that every piece that is churned out is safe to use, and it's durable to use, and it's going to put up with whatever you put it through. Now, back on the line of the crazed and all that, my father-in-law has a mug that our kids glazed, like a paint your own pottery type of a thing that our kids did many, many years ago. All of our kids are grown up now, probably like 20 years old. And he's 92, about to be 93, and he's used this crazed mug for about 20 years. And he's fine. So, you got to take everything with a grain of salt. But that is, that's the main reason why I like stoneware, is because at any build, any type of build, that clay is going to be solid, it's going to be vitrified, it's going to be durable. It can stay outside in weather extremes. It can be taken from the refrigerator or freezer, get to room temperature, and then, put in the microwave, whatever it is. So it's just a versatile body of clay that is not only great fun to build with and throw with, but it's great fun to use, and you can use it forever. We're creating heirloom pieces. So that's what's exciting to me.
Yeah, that's exciting. I do like that. Do you want to talk a little bit about the glazes we use in the studio?
Sure. So I'm looking at our questions. I'm like, okay, what are you going to talk about? Yes. So again, academia. So there are glazes that are specifically for earthenware. There's glazes specifically for stoneware, and there's glazes specifically for high fire porcelain. we of course have stoneware, and so all of our glazes are certified basically for this temperature. Now we have underglazes, and we use something called Wonder Glaze Stroke and Coats also. Underglazes and the Wonder Glazes can also be used on low fire. But some of their colors work really well at our high fire. Now some colors don't. Some colors that are meant for low fire, when you're firing them to mid fire, they wash out. A lot of the reds, the purples, pinks, those colors, if they are formulated for low fire, they're not going to make it to mid fire. But we have other substitutes that we use that. I choose glazes, which we have over 100 glazes for our students to use, which is a massive amount of inventory for a studio our size. But I love glazes, I love color. You couldn't tell it because I have 500 pieces, literally 500 pieces waiting to be glazed at my home studio, but I love giving everybody the choices. Now, I test every color, every glaze color that comes out that we're interested in. I test for 6 months to a year before I bring it into our studio, because the companies may have certified the glazes for stoneware or whatever level, but every clay body reacts differently with the glazes, or vice versa, glazes react differently with the clay bodies. And so sometimes our clay bodies will bloat if the glaze isn't the right fit, or the right combination, doesn't like the glaze that we have, or it doesn't like the clay body we have. Sometimes we have something called shivering, and the glazes would kind of flake off, and again, because it doesn't like the clay body. So the glazes that we use, I've tested all of them. We offer 7 different clay bodies in our studio, so our members can choose from all of these 7 different clay bodies. So I need to make sure that every glaze we bring in here works with every one of our clay bodies. And because I always want to set up our students to, be as successful as possible. We have a couple that we have to notate that, this one has to have 4 coats instead of 3, so we can work on our clay bodies. Every single glaze that we bring in here is food safe. Now, some companies say things can be food safe. Some say they can be dinnerware safe, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But I only bring in food safe glazes. I don't want anybody to ever pick a glaze that they like, and even though we would write on the lid like not food safe or something like that, people aren't really great at reading our little notes, and I would never want to have them create something that is meant for food and not use a food safe glaze. Now, with that, there's a caveat too. All of our glazes are food safe / dinnerware safe if they're used by themselves. So the manufacturing companies cannot guarantee that if you were to layer 2 or 3 glazes, even if all of those are food safe, if you were to layer that the combination would still be food safe. They can't certify that. So the inside of any piece that I've ever sold has always just been one color. Now again, caveat, kind of just like my father-in-law, what I told you about the crazed pieces. In my own home, we have used pieces that have a variety of glazes on the inside, and again, still kicking. But that is one of those things. The difference between food safe and dinnerware safe is that food safety is obviously considered like in my mug, I can have my drink, it's all food safe, that's great. And it can be used on anything, and again, it's all safe for food. Dinnerware safe is kind of the next level of that. And what that means is that it can be scratched up and still be food safe. And what I mean by that is, think of a plate that's glazed, and you're using a knife and a fork and you're cutting on it and you're, stabbing with your fork. It sounds like I eat like a Neanderthal, but I'm actually vegan. But that is that you can make these marks or cut right on these surfaces, and they are hardier, so they're not going to crack, they're not going to have a problem. So even though we use it kind of interchangeably here, if you looked at some of the labels, some of those labels are going to say food safe, some of them are going to say dinnerware safe. The problem is in the industry is that every brand, every manufacturer has different qualifications for how they label them. So one brand might say dinnerware safe, and another brand might actually meet all of those qualifications, but they don't use the label dinnerware safe. They may still say food safe. So that's kind of an ambiguous thing between the glazes.
Okay. Well, that's good. It's
a lot.
It is a lot, but it's important for a foundation for where, things we're going to be talking about during the podcast. Mm-hmm. So.
And I never expect our students to remember any of this stuff, and I will say it like 100 gazillion times so that they know it. And not that it's important that they know all of these little things, but they are creating pieces, again, that hopefully will be here for a long time and that they'll use them. I think that's our biggest thing that people are surprised at. Even Thursday night when I came in and was talking about membership to one of your classes, I was saying about you can bake in these casserole things. And they were just, they were surprised. I was like, oh yeah, any of these things you can bake in. So
yeah, whenever I gift something, they're like really excited when I tell them you can microwave and dishwasher safe, put it in your oven and all that. Yeah.
Let me talk about the dishwasher for one for 1 minute. So a lot of people, because they are handmade pieces, they don't actually like to use the dishwasher. And some pieces, I do a lot of sculptural mugs for people and sculptural pieces, and they have some little, fancy things all the way around, and I might suggest to hand wash those. But over time, there's actually been some research done on these things, but the dishwasher is a safer place to actually wash your pottery, because when you are hand washing, a lot of times your pieces are slippery. I've heard from more people that have dropped their mugs or their bowls in a sink and they've shattered or they've broken because they were hand washing them rather than just taking them and put them in the dishwasher. So that's just kind of my platform on that, my little soapbox.
I finally got to where I could put my pieces in the dishwasher, and I love it. I use them a lot more. It makes them a lot more accessible in my kitchen.
It does.
Okay, so
got a whole long list here.
Okay, so for the podcast, what we were conceptualizing was basically our topic each week, going along with, in conjunction with what we're doing in membership.
Yeah.
Okay, so in September we've been working on like lids and boxes.
Yes.
So
to everybody's delight.
It's a learning month.
It's a learning month.
But it has been a learning month. Like, we have talked about constructing already, I think, 3 different types of lids.
Yes.
Like when the dome is the lid.
Yes.
I almost said when the lid is the lid. But when you are covering like a bowl.
Yeah.
And then we created a box last week. So do you want to talk to us? Well, first tell us about why you think this was an important lesson for us to learn. Like,
yeah. So
other than to cover something.
Yeah. So I'm the consummate educator. I'm always about the education and the progression of our students, our members, building and going down their own paths. And so I think it's really important for people to have these techniques at their fingertips. So when they decide that they want to make something, they can kind of roll back in that, Rolodex in their head and like, oh yeah, I can use this technique on this. And so what that means is I did teach boxes, and this time I taught 3 different ways to make a lid. Last year we did a couple different lid ways, but because if you want to make a teapot, you need to have a lid that fits. If you want to have a sugar bowl, you need to have a lid that fits. If you want to make a covered baker, a covered roaster, a butter dish, whatever it is that has a lid, they need to understand, or I felt like it's important to understand that not only do you just have a lid that fits, but you have a lid that fits well so that you can't knock it off your piece. And there's different ways of making a lid fit, and to have those tools in your toolbox so that when you are creating a lidded watering can, I don't know why you'd have a lidded watering can, but let's say you were having a lidded watering can, you would be able to picture, or you would be able to figure out what style lid would fit better or work better. So this year, and I say year because boxes are challenging and lids to fit are challenging. And we do so much through the year that it's kind of gotten to the point where I go back to lids maybe once a year. It takes a few months for everybody to de-stress after the lids are done. They're really not that bad. But this year I taught 3 different styles. One was a dome, so think of like the French butter dish kind of thing. So it has a base and then a dome lid, and how do you get that dome to fit in there and not just move from side to side? You want it to stay on there so you can come from the refrigerator with it, carry it all the way to the serving table, and the lid's not going to slide off. That's a key in ceramics because glaze is slippery. So if these lids don't fit right, they're just going to fall off and break. The second lid that I taught was, it's called a flange and gallery. Probably would be helpful to have some visual aids, but, and I do right here. So I don't have the dome right here, but that's a flange and gallery. And I don't have a box, it's over there. But a flange and gallery.
I think I put all your domes in the kiln.
There's actually one more dome in there, yeah, and then there's a box over here. So I don't know if you, okay. So a flange and gallery this is a flange, so it kind of extends out from the lid. And then this is a gallery. If you can see this little inset part right there. And the idea is that that flange sits on that bowl so that you see how, now my spoon, there's a place for the spoon in there, but you can see how that doesn't knock off. You know, that is very tight on there. And so we use that also when we are making luminaries. So luminaries have to have a little trap door on them, so you can put an electrical cord through kind of the bottom in a small little hole, but then you need to pull that electric cord up through the piece so that mine are kind of, they're right there. But anyways, you pull it up through a piece and then you attach the light bulb and all that and it goes back down. But you have to have a little trap door to be able to reach in and grab that, piece, the electrical cord. And so it's really important that these lids don't slip off because they're part of the build. So again, this has a trap door. Where you saw me, I had to put my hand all the way in there to tighten up the light. And so we had to make sure, I wanted them to be sure that when they build something like this, that this isn't going to come off. You know, this is right in there, and this is even a little bit of a different, this is kind of a wonky flange and kind of wonky gallery in there, but it's not going to slip off. It's part of the build, but it's also a necessary part of the build. So, whoops, now I did that one. But it's just really, to me, it's important that our students have as many tools in their toolbox as possible, so when they dream up whatever they want to create, they have those tools, or at least they have enough of a background or foundation to ask me, how do I do this? Or we did this gallery and flange, is that going to work on this kind of a build? Or do I need to do the lid that has the stoppers? Or do I need to do a plug style lid? Or do I need to do a dome style lid? But they may not be versed enough after one time or two times to do it on their own, but they know enough that the options are there and can ask and figure out how to construct, or ask me how to construct, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So when you are approaching a project like this, we have, it looks to me, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, it looks to me like we have two different approaches. Now granted, one is a sugar bowl and the other one is a lantern.
Yes.
But this one looks like it was thrown, the base was thrown on the wheel.
Yes.
The lid was thrown on the wheel.
Yes.
And then you added the topper.
Yes.
And created the spoon by
Yes.
hand.
Yes.
And then your lantern was hand built, patched on the bottom.
It was actually, yeah, I don't think it was patched. Although you can see that, because I did this at Florida Southern when I was teaching.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't have those forms. So I
Okay.
probably just
Pinched it maybe.
pinched it, and I wanted it to look barky,
Oh, okay.
tree barky.
Okay, so where do you, when you have an idea, where do you start? Do you, okay, do you
No, go
sketch
ahead.
it out, or do you, at this point it's probably a lot is in your head, but where's a good starting point when you're trying to approach a project that has multiple pieces?
Yeah, so this is going to be a response of do as I say, not as I do kind of thing, because I've been in this for so very long. But yeah, especially when I was teaching college level, and I teach our members, sketching is really important in the beginning, and so that's one way to start. And so if somebody is we had this discussion in class this morning because somebody was very methodical. You know, they have to have kind of a blueprint before they start building. And so for people that are like that, a sketch is very important. It gets them started. And even though the follow through might look completely different than what that original sketch was, that sketch helps them get started. You know, it was the old idea of the power of the white. And if like somebody who's drawing or painting or whatever, and they're looking at their white canvas, the power of the white overshadows them. And so there's this old story that I used to tell my students. It was Winston Churchill and his wife, okay, years ago. And they had company coming for lunch, right? And Winston Churchill was a painter. So he was up on the cliff doing plein air painting, and had his easel, his canvas, all that kind of stuff. And his wife approaches and says, "Winnie, honey, people are here for lunch. You ready to come down?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm painting. I can't take a break yet." Well, his canvas was completely white. And she's like, "You're not painting." And he's like, I'm getting in the mood. I'm getting in the mood, and it's speaking to me, but it's so powerful." And she took a brush and she slapped paint on that canvas, and she's like, "There, now there's no power of the white. You can do whatever you want." And so that's always been one of the ways that I have taught some people who are having trouble getting started, especially with clay, is that it's just clay. You cannot ruin it. His wife did not ruin that canvas. She started it for him. You know, no longer was it too much to handle. When I've taught art journaling, it was the same thing. Just scribble some words down on the paper, then that whiteness isn't staring back at you. Well, some people are looking at the lump of clay in that way. And no matter how much they sketch or whatever they do to prep, that lump of clay is still making them freeze. They think they have a creative block, which I don't believe in creative blocks. I just believe that you have to kind of open some avenues somewhere that are different than what you normally go down. And when you're talking about a lump of mud, there's really nothing else you can do to that lump of mud to make it less than a lump of mud, which means that anything you do to it is going to improve it, right? I mean, that's just the basic thing. So yeah, so some people who are very methodical, they will sketch out. Some people even will measure. They'll do measurements on their sketches, all those kinds of things. If that works for them, that works for them. But my advice to people and how I go about it now in my own practice, but again, I realize I have a lot more experience than people, but the idea of just don't care sounds really flippant and really wrong, but that's exactly what you have to do. You just can't care about every little thing when it comes to clay, because if you care too much, it will stop you in your tracks. And when you're building with clay, you have to go through a lot of stages, right? A lot of stages. One of those stages is what we call the ugly teenage years. You know, your piece has to almost be ugly and look like it's gonna fail or whatever before all of a sudden, overnight, it blossoms into this beautiful, wonderful piece. But that's part of the process. And so, like, just to give you an example, today we were doing lanterns, and I'm not teaching a specific lantern. I'm giving a prompt on how to create a lantern. I'm giving them tips and techniques and blah, 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 because they're all going to want different style lanterns. And some people didn't know where to start. They had zero idea. And I said, okay, just get the clay in your hands. Just start moving your fingers. Just let that happen. Don't think about it. Don't care about it. Just do this as an exercise and getting your hands in the mud. And from that, people developed different things this morning. We had somebody that turned their lump of clay into a pumpkin, and that's going to be a luminary. We had somebody else who is usually very structured, and she decided to make an acorn lamp. And I had her just feel it out, pinch it out, just not structure it kind of out. Somebody else was doing this like open leaf bowl type of a thing where the cutouts were in between all the leaves and the light would shine through there. But again, it was just finding a starting place. And a lot of times when you find that you don't know how to proceed, just getting that clay in your hands and start pinching around, that may not stay as your foundation to the piece you're working on, but it may trigger or spark an idea. So yeah, there's many ways to start, but I don't suggest reverse engineering unless you have a really specific thing in mind, and then you do have to reverse engineer that piece. But for me, teaching how to find their creative expression is really just to get your fingers in that clay and start and be able to be flexible and alter as you go. People are so amazed at what they make too. And sometimes the conversation is, that's completely out of my comfort zone. I have to have these plans. I'm trying to create this style. And we talk about that as you don't really create a style. You embody a style. And your style starts to become noticeable after you've made multiple pieces and you set them beside each other. Then you're going to identify the kind of style that you are. And this is different what we're saying than like if you're decorating your house and you like mid-century modern or you like, Victorian or whatever you do. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about your actual creative expression, which doesn't necessarily match what you choose of already made things. Your inner, what you're unearthing.
Quotes, yes, say that again.
Okay, can I remember? Okay, so your personal style that's coming from inside of you, that you're unearthing, is not necessarily the same as what you would gravitate to in purchasing pre-made things. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. That's why I wanted you to say it again.
Woohoo!
Because it's really important, because you go to the store and sometimes you think, well, I really like this, and you'll say to yourself, it's not my style. Well, but it is different. Like the stuff that I appreciate at a store, whether it's a big box or, a artisan shop, it's very different from what I make myself.
Right.
And that's important for, I think, artists to know or to acknowledge. That
Right.
acknowledgement's big.
Yeah, that acknowledgement is huge. And I'm a collector of pottery as well. I'm a collector of all art, but everywhere we go, I try to get a piece of local pottery from a local artist. And what I choose isn't necessarily something that I would make, but it's something that I can tell what that artist is like, from their piece. And a lot of people will sit here and they're like, well, but I like things with straight edges. I like things that are structured. And as they go down this rabbit hole, they're creating things that are definitely not structured. And it's not because they don't know how to, it's because they have found comfort in the way that they're creating. And that's how your style of creating is developed, is by producing, by practicing, by building, by creating many things. And then all of a sudden you look at them all and you're like, wow, I made that. And you can tell somebody who's coming in the door, and we might have four ceramic artists here at the tables, and mix all their pieces up. And somebody just walking in the door, the everyman, I call my husband the everyman because he just kind of walks in the door and he's, not really an artist and can kind of pick out, but he would be able to pick out which pieces go together in a collection because that style has come through so much. Yeah. But it's not necessarily what you have planned it to be.
Yeah.
So.
I guess you sort of covered this. But when you are approaching something, how do you decide if you're going to start on the wheel or if you're going to start hand building?
So it's really about the teaching now. My own personal collections that I create and sell, or like what I did for Disney for all those years and all that, everything was started out on the wheel. It's not only is it faster, which again, when I was selling at shows and at Disney, I had to produce a lot. So not only is it faster, but it is more proficient, I think. And so for the most part, I started on the wheel. I always make this statement, I made this earlier today because one of my show and tell activities and membership this week is all about my wheel thrown pieces that are altered. I have this thing that wheel thrown is more kind of not structured, that word and I don't get along very well, but more refined. Even if I alter it, it's a more refined piece. They're usually thinner, so they're lighter and more functional. I just feel like that is more, I enjoy that more. I enjoy making a mug on the wheel versus hand building a mug. And so in contrast, when I hand build something, that I want to be more earthy, more wonky, more unique, all of those words that we use, whimsical. I feel like that gives me the opportunity to just go kind of haywire a little bit and have it more wildly made, which I enjoy that too. And then of course my favorite thing is to put the two together. Since I'm focused on teaching so much right now, there's a lot of things that I have to hand build for samples or demos that I would normally do on the wheel. And so that's that right now, because that's my goal and what I have to do. That's the role that I play because I'm not showing anymore. That's how I determine it. Now, how somebody who is coming up in this, the ceramic artists that we're raising, we don't have a lot of people that are proficient on the wheel yet. We have some, and of course our throwing instructor is very proficient on the wheel. So a lot of times when I'm teaching in hand building, he is doing the alternative version on the wheel and then altering it. So my dream, what I can't wait to happen, is that we have more members that are more proficient on the wheel, that I can say, okay, go throw a 6-inch cylinder that is, 3 inches wide or whatever, belly out the bottom, make it look like a Bombay type style, and we're gonna put a lid on it, and we're gonna have this kind of, unique piece. But we're not there yet, and that's okay. It takes a little while. And I also feel like students who do get more proficient on the wheel, like I had somebody at Florida Southern who was very proficient on the wheel by the end of the semester, but she loved altered pieces. So every single thing she threw on the wheel, she took a paddle to and altered it. And it was great. It was beautiful. So that's how I determine for me is, again, because as a teacher, what's the purpose going to be?
Let's sidetrack that for a second, because one of the things we've talked about is the love of hand building you have instilled in all of us.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, like so many of us came in thinking that we would do a little bit of hand building and then learn the wheel, but we have so many people in the studio that just love hand building.
Yeah. It blows my mind. It honestly blows my mind. I have taught for over 30 years, and I've never really had a situation where people wanted to do more hand building and really not try the wheel. The wheel's hard. I mean, that's the bottom line. The wheel is a challenge. And a lot of people come in and think they're going to throw a Grecian vase after, one lesson. The reason why we do wheel throwing in membership only and not as a non-member class is because you have to give the time. You have to be committed to the time it's going to take to build your skills. But I did assume that, and we have 10 wheels, I'm looking at them right now, 1 teacher one and 9 student ones, so that everybody in class, if they so choose to be on the wheel, they all have their own wheel and nobody has to share. I never really thought that people would fall in love with hand building as much as they have, which is great. I love that. That's phenomenal. But they do. They're like, and I think that they're surprised too, because a lot of them come in and think that they're just going to throw, and we start in hand building. Hand building allows students and ceramic artists, whoever, to really determine every little aspect of the build. Whereas throwing, you've got a motor to it, your piece is just going to grow within a few minutes, and then you can do whatever you want to it. But hand building, you're starting out with either a slab or a lump of clay or a pinch pot or coil, whatever it is, and you can really kind of drive it, steer it into this creation that has things protruding or growing out of it, or cut this for lights in it, and it's whatever. It's giving people a lot more creative freedom and opportunity for creative expression, and they're really loving that. Yeah. Which falls in with our premise that this is a safe space to experiment in, and they are. And so, yeah, it caught me off guard, but it's great. I love it. And it is, people are just going crazy for it. My 2 favorite things in clay, in pottery, is throwing on the wheel and sculpting. And so that's where, we have a big sculpting workshop coming up next week, and a multi-day sculpting thing. And so I have always loved both of those, and a lot of times I'll put them together. So I throw my base and then I'll sculpt the other extra parts of it. But people are really enjoying building their bases from the foundation up and sculpting or adding things on it, whatever they like. It's amazing to me. It's great fun to be part of. I was surprised, and now I'm just really endeared by it because people just love it so much.
Yeah, and I think it's, for me, like I'm still just now learning the wheel, so I have a long way to go. But the connection you get to the clay with the hand building, like I love just having my hands on the clay for a couple hours
Yeah.
in class or in open studio or whatever.
Well, that's grounding.
Yeah,
you
it is
know,
very grounding.
It's very grounding. To me, it's equivalent to walking barefoot on the sand at the beach. It's very grounding. And the other thing, as far as my teaching philosophy, is that I believe that people need to hand build, get to know how the clay works. They get to know how they interact with the clay. They have conversations with the clay because, as we know, clay is very stubborn sometimes and tells us what it wants to be. But all of those things you're comfortable with before you actually get on the wheel. Because once you add a motor to it, it's a whole different story.
Yeah.
So that's been interesting, you know.
And I think, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like right now I'm thinking about all the mechanics, like are my arms in the right position? Are my feet in
Yeah.
the right position? Is the clay in the right position? Are we so right now I'm in all the thinking stages, but
Right.
later that stuff comes more naturally
Oh,
and then
sure.
you're more focused on the shapes and the,
The issue is, like, I built a cockatoo sculpture yesterday in my home studio as an example for our sculpture workshop next week. And my things are always functional, even sculptures. And so I was making this kind of a vase type. There's a cockatoo on a branch, and then there's a vase that kind of inserts itself into the back of this cockatoo as if it was in front of a tree trunk. The cockatoo's in front of the tree trunk. And I actually was going to throw the tree stump vase and then use that. But I had almost finished the cockatoo sculpt, and if I went and threw that vase, I was going to have to wait several hours for it to dry before I could trim it, and then start playing around with it. And so it was just quicker, but also after I did it by hand, I realized that it fit the aesthetic of the hand-built cockatoo better than the throne was. Now, I've done that before. I've hand-built a sculpture and have thrown pieces to go with it, but this just made more sense. And so you start to not only, like you said, become second nature with it all, but you start to kind of look ahead and envision the finished pieces and decide, is this refined shape on the wheel, even if I alter it a little bit, is that going to fit with the aesthetic of what I'm trying to produce with this hand-built thing? Or do I need to, since I hand-built this, should I hand-built that part too? You just start kind of having these conversations in your mind, and it leads you to the answer naturally, organically.
like for example, your lantern here, like had you thrown the base on the wheel, you wouldn't have had such a more natural, like
Right.
bark-ish looking
Exactly.
necessarily. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I have a few, and I know we're going to wrap up or whatever. But so this is another little lantern. It's a little strawberry, something like this.
Oh.
But I actually threw, you can't even tell because I beat it up so much, but I actually threw that part on the wheel, and there's that kind of a flange. But this was a more structured lid that would go with the throne piece. So I actually had to be more, in fact, no, I don't think I threw this top, but it had to fit the aesthetic better. So it's a little bit more refined, whereas this was just very earthy and wonky and all of that. So yeah, you do figure out how you want that finished aesthetic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there anything that I should be asking you about boxes that I didn't think about?
No.
Anything we didn't? Nothing we didn't talk about?
I'm sure they will pop back up in our conversations at some point.
Okay. Well, I guess that wraps us up for this week. Do you have anything else?
No, well, actually, right, you just said that. Yeah, so the other thing with the boxes, let me just, since we were already talking about that, and I'm working with one student in membership to do this, but last year when we did boxes, it was around the same time of year, and I made 2 big pumpkins that I turned into 2 soup tureens. And so again, when we're talking about why was it important to have to know about lids, that's a really good example, because I made a big pumpkin and then made that lid so that it could come off, and made an area where a ladle would fit in and all that, but the whole base of the pumpkin is a soup tureen. And so again, I wasn't teaching soup tureens to the whole class, but because people caught on to how to do a flange and gallery lid, they could decide to do something like that if they wanted to, because that learning was already there. So there you go. That was a good example.
Before we wrap up, we mentioned the sculpture workshop.
Yes.
Will you tell me about that?
Yes. I do love sculpture workshops. So sculpture workshops, I am doing twice a year, basically. They take a lot out of me and our students. It's actually a 3-day workshop, 2 days building, and then about 6 weeks later coming back for the glaze. In the fall, I do animals. So this one next week is coming up, and I call it Wild, Whimsical, or Real Animal Sculpture Workshop, because you can do any of those. They can be look like animated pieces or whimsical animals or the real animal. And then in the spring, I can't remember if it's February or March, it coincides with International Women's Day each year, and it's women, goddesses, whatever they want to do. That doesn't mean men can't join, but and we do have a couple men that are doing our sculpture with us. So it's really important to me to teach sculpture in depth. And one of the reasons is because, number one, we don't have time and membership to do these 17-hour sculpts, right? And it's interesting because I'm not even looking for students to master their sculpt. I'm looking for students to understand the steps, the path to creating a sculpture. So for example, when you're creating something that's a living thing, whether it's an animal or a person, living things grow from their core. So the middle, right? And so people don't understand where to start a lot of times, but when you start to explain we grow from our core, that helps a little bit for people to understand. You don't just do this big head and add a body to it. We start out as these little babies and we're growing like this. So we grow from our core. Well, that's how clay should grow when you're building. And so we talk about things like that. We talk about how to do details that are expressive details in clay that show motion of a still life. I mean, it is a still life, but it's a still piece, but you can incorporate motion, the idea of motion in there, or it portrays the idea of motion. We talk about expressive eyes, how we build those, and even how we glaze those to kind of get across feeling. It's a level of building with clay that is yet another path. So we have hand building, we have wheel throwing, and we have sculpture. And somebody who is just beginning either one of these can actually still do sculpture because, again, it's a different path. And so I had intended that to be a destination workshop, that people would come to Lakeland, Florida and take these membership workshops. We are selling out of these membership, or did I say membership workshop? I meant sculpture workshop, sorry.
With our members.
With our members. Yeah, we are selling out these sculpture workshops with just our members. There's not even room for non-members that live locally at this point. Members get first dib, it's sold out. And I'm talking like 15, 16 people at one time. We can't handle more than that to do a multi-day sculpture thing. So that's exciting to me. But the best thing I think is something that you said after the first one that you participated in was that, do you remember what you said?
Sure.
So you said that you felt like your skills elevated overnight with the sculpture workshop, that it just made several things click that weren't clicking before, and it gave context to some things that you were working on. And it just overnight made you just again, just elevate.
Yeah.
And that shows in your pieces too. I mean, you know, everything from your daily work to what you're teaching to all of that after that first really exploded onto a different level. So that was really good.
Yeah. No, I did really feel that way because I'm somebody that's like
Yeah.
not afraid to walk away from my piece, you know, to give it like time to rest or whatever. I think that's important. But on the flip side of that, sticking with the piece also helps
Yeah.
build your confidence. So when you do work on it for 16, 17 hours, you get to see the continuation of it. You're not walking away from it.
That's right. That's right. And that's a good topic that we can touch on again, especially as we go through this next workshop.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
All right. I think we did well.
Yeah. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed it. And do you want to tell everybody where to find us?
Oh, yes. We want you to find us. So if you would like to go to visit our website, everything is actually through our website. All all non-member classes to sign up for. We have one more 4-week class that is Diana teaches. It's in October. This is our last one for 2024, and that is the key class that not only teaches you foundations in hand building, but it's a requirement, a prerequisite for getting an invite to membership. So you can head to marvelousmudpotterystudio.com/pottery classes and see all the classes that we have available for the rest of 2024. We are so excited to have you come in and do either a 2-part class with Diana. She has even 1-part classes to do ornaments, I think, coming up.
And some bowls and cups, mugs.
All those kind of wonderful things. And then the 4-week class again. So just go on there, check us out. And you can always email me with any questions.
And that's marvelousmudpotterystudio.com.
Yes.
And then on Facebook and Instagram, it's Marvelous Mud Pottery Studio.
Yes, Marvelous Mud Pottery Studio on all those. On some of the other platforms, it is Pottery Studio. So either look for Marvelous Mud Pottery Studio or for Marvelous Mud Pottery Studio is our handle on like LinkedIn and I don't know, some of the other things. We're everywhere now. So thanks for tuning in. We will see you again.